This is a trash to treasure like no other. It's not a microcomputer, it's not a console, it's an entire building. It's this building that we are restoring. It's going to take the whole summer, and hopefully we haven't bitten off more than we can chew, and it's going to involve every member of the Retro Collective, all hands on deck to make this happen. Why is it happening and how is it happening? Well, first of all, why? We had off-site storage for the museums, and that was some storage containers. It was always temporary, never the best way to store retro equipment. And we wanted to bring it on site so that it was more secure and more convenient to get to. So we rented a small part of this space from Heber, and we had the opportunity to rent the rest of the space. So at the start of the year, we made some very humble plans. Then we had the digital bundle fundraiser. Now this was a bundle that I made available in our shop and just thought maybe we can raise a little bit of money to help us with this project. It went insane. So the first thing I need to say is thank you to every one of you who bought that bundle and supported the project. It completely transformed our plans, as you'll see in today's video. And we are going to create something amazing, which will do something that I set out in that digital fundraiser bundle. It will help us to become a real museum, in inverted commas. A real museum. What does that mean? It means we'll have a space to properly inventory stuff, a space to really nicely store stuff, not a storage container, with everything asset tagged, everything on our inventory system so you can browse it publicly from anywhere in the world. And we know what we've got, the value of it for insurance, and where it is if we want to make a video on it or put it on display in an exhibition. So this space is going to really elevate the museum and the videos, and it's thanks to you, so a big thank you. In today's video, I'm going to show you what our plans are. I'm going to show you how far we've progressed. Obviously, this is a big project. It's going to take several episodes, so we're not going to have the satisfaction at the end of the episode of a complete transformation, but we do make some big strides. We've been working on this for some months before we even get to this part one. So let's get into an entire building. It's called the Pump House, by the way, this building. Trash to treasure. This is what we started with then. As I said, it was called the Pump House, and it's a shared space that Heber was storing things in, and we were also using for arcade storage and some repairs. It has been tidier than this, I can assure you, but here we are decanting everything to clear the space so that we can work on it. Now, if you look beyond the mess, it's fair to say that it has seen better days. It's not an ideal place for working in. I was recording an episode just before Christmas, and I could actually see my breath on the camera. So I had to take everything inside to the museum to do some soldering at that point. That's how bad it got, and that's not ideal working conditions at all. There's absolutely no insulation in this place. There's lots of bits of wood hanging down from the ceiling, just waiting to land on my head. So our first job was to get the whole building emptied out, which involved a lot of skips and a lot of hard work, as you can see here. While the mill itself is Grade 2 listed, meaning it's a protected building, the pump house here is a later construction with no such restrictions, so that's handy. But it does have some interesting history which will guide our decorating choices, and we'll learn about that history later on today. To help us empty it, we have called in two 20-foot containers in the car park, which you would think would be enough to accommodate all of the things that we might have. Here I am going inside, and they are pretty spacious if we take a look in there. But we have now in fact filled both of them to the absolute limit. We've got some sorting out to do, of course, before all of that comes back in. It wants to be neatly stored. A lot of it is inventoried and asset tagged, so those are the easy bits, but a lot of it isn't. And we're going to have to think about things like the size of the arcades, because we want them to go into the inventory too. So as part of this new space, we're going to want a big turntable or something like that we can put arcades on, photograph them and really document them nicely. So that will all be part of our considerations in designing the space. You can start to get a better idea of the space that we have now. There's a mezzanine at one end of the room, and there's a staircase on the right-hand side going up to the mezzanine with a small room under it, which Heber used to use for document archiving. And up on the mezzanine, Holly and Jason are taking apart some shelves that we had up there for CRTs because it's nearly smashing time. Holly there enjoying the scissor lift. That will be really important shortly when we get right up into the roof space. Any wood that can be salvaged in the demolition will be, so that we can, well, make your money go as far as possible. That wood isn't cheap, so we want to reuse that where we can. And while we will be doing all of the work ourselves, or at least 99% of the work in here, I really want you to know that the tolerances, where the beam should be, everything like that has been calculated by someone far more professional than me. That definitely shouldn't be left to me. And at the end of the work, all of it will be signed off. All of the evidence will be provided to show that it's been built to building regulations and the standards that it needs to meet. See, I don't even know what those standards are. That's why it shouldn't be left to me. But people in the know are all over that, so don't worry. And I know that we've certainly overcompensated with regards to the weight bearing and the tolerances that are built into this structure, so it's all good. Now, we're smashing it up, and you're probably wondering, what is the plan to build it back up? So let me show you. And I should also mention that this is possible thanks to our kind sponsor, PCBWay.com. They've supported us day in, day out for years now, keeping the museum running, keeping the lights on, and now helping us with this project alongside you with the digital support bundle. You know who they are and what they do. Head to PCBWay.com for all of your PCB needs and everything else that they do. And everyone here at the Retro Collective thanks them for their support. The plan as we presented it originally during that fundraising bundle video was that we would keep the mezzanine, which we're now smashing up, and we'd build another one to mirror it on the other side. And well, that was it really. We'd brave the elements, we'd heat the small rooms as best we could, and we'd consider that to be better than having off-site containers. But then the fundraiser happened, and as I said, that changed everything. So these were my hastily knocked up drawings that I put forward to the professionals for proper drawings, but they were all based on my draft here. So we now have a ground floor with 3 rooms comprising of a storeroom for each museum and a vault in the middle, or library, which is for software, magazines, books and manuals, as well as all of our inventory processing tools, computers, scanners, asset tags, cleaning equipment, everything that we might need to process inventory items and look after them, as well as being able to pick any magazine that we want. On the left is a staircase. On the right is a goods elevator, and that's large enough and chunky enough for any arcade machine that we might want to take up on it. It's quite an interesting lift. It's going to need some adapting to make it safer, but it fit our budget. I'm just going to say that about it now. It's going to be interesting when it appears in a future episode and how we get around that. Suffice to say, no members of the public will be going near that elevator. Why do we need it? Well, because there is a second floor here on the plans. It is a completely open plan floor which spans the entire space of the garage, which means it's a very large open plan space, which is perfect for our restorations, and it's built from the ground up with video making in mind. We can put lights wherever we want to on the beams up high there. We can have multiple cameras, we can have multiple stations for all of the jobs that we need to do as part of a restoration, be it electronics, be it cleaning, be it woodwork. It's all designed with that in mind. It's going to be an incredible, incredible space. I can't wait to see how it turns out. So open plan, no messing about. That's what we're going to do with this space. While the pump house wasn't built hundreds of years ago like the mill, it turns out it does still have some real history to it. And in deciding how we should decorate it, we got some help to research the building thanks to Heber's resident historian, Lily. So while we're kicking in walls, let's go and get a little bit of a history lesson on the pump house from Lily.
Hello, I'm Lily. I work for Heber. In a previous life, I was also an archaeologist and a heritage consultant. So I have really enjoyed looking into the history of the pump house, which the Retro Collective are currently renovating for new use. I'm not entirely sure when the pump house was actually built. Maps from the site from 1888 show a smaller building where the current pump house would have been. It's likely that this was a precursor to our current pump house being used as waterworks. It's actually shown on a map from the 1970s. That's the first map evidence we have of the pump house. Also, a photo from Gloucester Archives from 1949 shows a plaque commemorating the opening of the waterworks. So it's likely that the building was probably built around the 20s or 30s. Chalford, up until about the 50s, didn't have running water. There's a lot of local history referencing people having to visit the wells and the springs to get their water for drinking and bathing and going to the toilet. The local Chalford history group has been an invaluable source for finding out about the pump house. There is not a lot of history recorded by the actual water companies themselves of where the buildings were and when they were decommissioned and that kind of thing. One resident remembers in the 1950s saying, "Heber Mill was Clark Mill by the mill pond. That's where I did my apprenticeship. The waterworks worked. They had steam engines going and 15-foot cast iron wheels." Another remembers, "At Belvedere, all the engineering was inside for pumping, but the toilets, you'd sit on the bucket and the river would be rushing beneath. It scared me to death. I'd be feeling as though I might fall in. It was only a seat, and then in winter, very draughty." And we can get an insight as to what this would have looked like from these pictures, which I found at Gloucester Archives. Within these photos, you can see a lower, darker border has been painted around the walls, along with darker marks on the floor. In the current pump house, as it is now, you can see red markings on the floor. So it's possible that the dark markings on the floor would have been painted red, which would have been really useful for showing up any oil stains if anything went wrong with the machinery. The darker border around the edges tends to be a common feature in institutional buildings at this time, purely because it was a more hard-wearing paint. It didn't show up scuffs and it didn't show up dirt, and it was much cheaper than painting the whole thing. So the rest of the building would have been painted white. A further picture from 1970s shows different machinery in different places within the pump house. This seems to be much larger and much more heavy duty. I'm not sure when it fell out of use, but I know that the surrounding outbuildings were demolished in the 90s and that the mill itself was recorded as derelict in 1972, but the waterworks were still present. So it's going to be somewhere between the late 70s and the late 80s as to when the waterworks were decommissioned. If we fast forward to the 90s now, I have an architect's plan of Heber's land and Heber's ground, taken from Heber's archive, which shows the old pumping station as it is labelled on the map as part of a larger complex of buildings. These buildings were demolished in the 90s, and our very own Richard Horne took some photos of it at the time, him being a young lad at the time, fresh out of engineering school. These show the two buildings surrounding the pump house being taken down. You can see the steel struts within there. There's also the pressure vessels, which were removed from what is now the car park. These would have been part of the waterworks and potentially also part of the steam engines and machinery that would have been used to power the mill. Interestingly, we can see on what is now the external wall of the pump house is that lower border painting, which is in the lighter colour of blue and white, which is the more modern painting that we can see internally within the pump house now. But it suggests that it was all one building being used as one thing, housing machinery. So those other buildings were demolished, the car park was tarmacked over, but the pump house remained and stands as it does today. I've really enjoyed looking into the history of the pump house, and I would like to do some more when time allows. Everything that I've found so far is going to be part of Heber's archive, and I'm really pleased that the Retro Collective are taking on board what I found and using it to inform how they're going to redevelop and redecorate the space as a nod towards its history and its industrial past. And I can't wait to see how it comes out.
Thank you to Lily for digging into that history. I really enjoyed seeing the pictures, hearing about the history of this building, and to know that this piece of concrete infill here where I'm stood is exactly where a pump used to be 100 years ago, serving the local village and pumping water up the hills, which is also important, as anyone who's ever played SimCity knows full well. Now, the demolition is going on. We're nearly at the end of demolishing this space, and then we can start to build back better.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Something that we do have to balance out while we're doing this is that the building itself still belongs to Heber and we're renting it, which means that while we want to improve the building, we don't want to pump all of the money that you guys have contributed and we've put into this into the building itself. Ideally, we'll be here for decades, but in a worst case scenario, we want to be able to take as much as we can with us. It would be foolish not to plan in that way. So it's a difficult balance. That being said, Heber are also investing in the building in a way that will help us all. So there's a lot of give and take going on here in the spirit of the collective. Heber have helped us all by investing in solar panels that you can see going up here. You'll also notice there's 4 EV chargers on the front of the building, and these panels feed not only those, but also the whole of the mill and the museums. We are effectively a computer museum and an arcade now that can run completely on green energy. How do I know that? Well, it was estimated when the panels were put in that they would generate 30% of the electricity for the site, and that's about how much electricity our museums take. So when we're the only ones in on a Saturday or a Sunday and the museums are open, we can be running purely on green energy, which is fantastic. That being said, Richard has told me that the estimates were 30%, but already all of those panels up there are generating far more. I think it's closer to 40% of the electricity, maybe more. So it's a fantastic addition, and it's helped to bring the service costs down of the museum, which helps us too. So thank you to Heber for their contribution to this build. So that's phase 1, clearing, demolishing, moving everything out of the building. And I am trying to capture the entire build from a construction time-lapse camera up here, so you can see a little bit of that, and at the end hopefully we'll get a full time-lapse from start to finish of the whole build, which will be fun to see. So now we can start to create our dream space. Here's how it looks now, and you can see that the insulation has arrived. And Holly and Jason set about installing this over the course of, I think it took 3 or 4 days to get it all up using the scissor lift, the 2 of them. Jason had completely overcome his fear of heights by the end of it, I'm assured. And the boards are secured into place up there. Then the gaps will be taped, and finally a fire retardant finish will be sprayed with a great big wide nozzled spray gun using very special paint that's on back order now. We couldn't just go and get it off the shelf. That will be sprayed all across to make it meet the standard for fireproofing. And then we'll see how that looks. It might look good enough to just be a ceiling like that, or we might have to consider then boarding over the top of it. We'll see how we go with that. But I can tell you, it's already made a big difference. Standing here today on a sunny day, I'd usually be baking in here, and ever since that's gone up, it's been a lovely consistent temperature. So that's a really good sign. It's made a huge difference. And I should think so too. And this stuff is thick. Look at the size of that. That is some chunky insulation. So yeah, made a big difference, as you might expect. Now at this point, we didn't have the scissor lift on hire for much longer, so we wanted to get the most out of it, and we made our first pass at painting. So that involved cleaning, scraping and preparing the walls as much as possible. We covered the whole building in a mix of PVA and water to prepare everything to take the paint. Here comes the boss.
Oh God, I am exhausted. I know you've been already busy out here. My eyes are stinging.
Oh no, he's been sat down all day.
Yeah, I've been sat down staring at a screen.
Poor Richard. And thanks to Lily's research, we managed to settle on the colours that we felt were right for the building for its new purpose. So we've chosen a light blue, almost white, but a light blue for the walls, similar to a colour that we found on the brickwork. There's some of it here behind me. And similar to the colours that we saw in the 90s photos when it was being demolished. And then on the lower wall, we've gone all the way back to the oldest photos we can find, and we're having that black strip. Now, areas such as this, you won't see it because you'll have the floor up there, and then we'll have walls for our rooms downstairs. But over in the entrance hallway, you'll certainly see it, and we're making a big feature of that so you can see the lovely black stripe there. Now for the top floor, I have sourced some flooring, enough to cover the whole of it, and it's reclaimed flooring from an old distillery. I don't know exactly where that distillery was yet. I'm going to try and find out for a future episode. And I don't know yet how it smells. It could be absolutely glorious. But either way, it's going to look suitably industrial, weathered, worn, and it's going to fit in really nicely with the building up here. And we're not going to worry too much about scraping it or scratching it up. It will continue its life in this building. I'm looking forward to that arriving. I carried on scraping the walls to prepare them, and I did find some of that original black paint underneath several layers. Here it is. So there we go. We can see that this very definitely was painted black way back in those photos. We also found a hole in the wall, and nobody quite knew what it was. Now we can see on the plans that there is a room there, but it seems everyone at Heber had completely forgotten about this room. Nobody really knows what's in there. There must be a door around the back of the building to get in there, but it's completely covered in brambles. So here we are. I can stick the camera in and we can have a look in the hole. We think it's probably rented by the electricity board, who have a substation just outside the building. But nobody's ever been there. Nobody's ever been to visit. I don't know, maybe we can use that space. Maybe there's a locked safe in there. Maybe it will make us internet famous, who knows. Anyway, we've got a hidden room. Watch this space. We'll see if anything comes of that. Let's get back to painting now. We are rollering on the first coats, and you can see there's plenty of work to be done. We don't just roller it on, we've got to get in between the bricks. It doesn't matter how big a pile of roller that we use, we've still got to get in there with the paint brushes, and in the worst cases, a little bit of filler in there to hide the gaps. It's never going to be perfect. We don't mind it looking a bit weathered and worn at the end of it, as long as it looks clean and nicer than it did. So as we rush towards the end of our first update, Holly got to work on recycling some of that timber that we smashed out from under the mezzanine, and she's starting some of the framework for the I-beams and for the rooms, laying out the damp-proof course to make sure that we keep all of the rooms dry. Of course, we need to do plenty of damp proofing. We need to make sure there's insulation down around the windows on the ground floors, and everything is made good so that when we put our collection in here, we meet our goal of having something that's better than a storage container. We want to keep the temperature and the humidity nice and consistent down here. So we are going to try that with insulation and the building as it is. But if that doesn't come through for us, of course, we'll be measuring what those levels are. We have the option of putting an air conditioning unit and whatever we need right on the walls. It's just an expense we're trying to avoid at this point, so we'll see how we go. And that brings us to today. Very much still looking like a building site, but as you can appreciate, I think, it took a huge amount of effort just to empty the building, let alone to do this much work on it already. And I hope those that backed the digital bundle and the patrons who support us month by month are enthused by what we've done so far, and can appreciate the effort that's gone in there. We are really working hard to get this done as quickly as possible for you. And also, we don't want stuff in the containers as winter comes around, and we don't want to be working in here in an open building site with winter coming around. So we're working as quickly as possible to get all of this done, and then to start the videos, because I'm acutely aware that while I'm carrying on with Trash to Treasures like the Acorn Atom recently, we've got to get stuck into those arcade machines. We've got to get those arcade restorations that we've started finished, and we've got a whole room of arcades that we need to work through, arcades waiting for restorations, get them out for the public to play on and make videos about those too. So this is going to be a dream space for the arcades. Of course, we can do micros and things like that in the electronics stations up on the floor above us. Cannot wait to see it, but there's a whole lot of work ahead of us before we get there. Hopefully you'll follow along. Please do subscribe if you haven't already done so. You might not be here for DIY work specifically. I know it's not our usual type of content, but it's all part and parcel of trying to create the greatest retro computer museums, arcades, and preservation facilities for those things in the country, in the world maybe. Who knows? We've come this far, and we just continue to make strides with your support in achieving that goal. Do come and visit and find out more about what we're doing here. Head to retrocollective.co.uk if you'd like to book a visit. Head to patreon.com/The Retro Collective if you'd like to support what we're doing. And our next big event is Tony Temple's coming to give a talk on arcade raids. It's going to be very exciting. And as part of that talk, I'm going to try and use this construction site, regardless of what state it's in at the time, as a kind of art installation. And I will probably make a video about creating that installation. It's going to be an interesting one. I'm not quite sure. I've got in my head how I want it to look, but I'm not quite sure if it will work. So look out for that video soon. And thank you for taking the time to watch. Hopefully you'll be with us throughout the rest of the build over the summer. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.